What are the bigger benefits for golf conditioning in terms of golf performance?
Yeah, so talking conditioning as in like fitness and cardiovascular health, or are we talking just conditioning in general, like being
In
fit and
general,
strong and capable?
strength,
Yeah,
flexibility,
mate,
cardiovascular.
I really feel that the stone that is often left unturned with almost every single golfer that you see on the course is their bodies. Their bodies just aren't in a position, whether it's flexibility, mobility, speed, stamina, endurance, power output, whatever it might be, they're leaving that stone, like that portion of their game, unturned. They'll go and buy all the equipment, they'll go and do lessons, they'll go and do all these things, but the vehicle which swings the golf club, that is the most important thing in the whole equation, is often left to just like a couple of stretches here, or treating it like I like to say, if we had a Formula One car, we wouldn't go away and do the things that we do, put all the fuels that we put into our bodies, like beer and like all the like crap, essentially. We wouldn't be putting that into a race car. So we're doing all this stuff outside of the game, not training, and expecting our bodies to perform really well on the course.
Okay, so today we're here with Shaun, and we're going to have a great episode talking about golf fitness and how you can use this to shoot lower scores. So before we crack on, Shaun, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience and let them know where you've been, where you've come from, and then I suppose what you do now?
Yeah, mate. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be on the other end of it, having, just interviewed you recently on my podcast. So, mate, I'm an Australian, as people can probably tell from my accent, and I'm currently living in the Cayman Islands. My wife brought us over here with her work, but grew up in Australia, played lots of sports as a kid, got introduced to golf very young, and then actually went to the military for a good period of time and worked on helicopters and tinkered with, avionics systems and weapons and all sorts of stuff there. And that's how I got my knowledge on how to fault find, troubleshoot, and find issues and break down systems, which really relate aircraft maintenance to the human body, in that we can, half split things and figure out where things are going on so that we can, troubleshoot a body, essentially. From there, discovered my love of fitness, because all military guys, love to train and go hard and that type of thing. Like, it's a bit of a, not a misconception, but like a bit of a stereotype, all military guys are sort of fit and strong. I definitely fit into that category and went down that route, opened a CrossFit gym for a number of years and sold that a couple of years ago. And through like the back end of owning that gym and going through COVID and also being an avid golfer myself, I just sort of fell into starting to help people with their golf fitness, because I'd be out playing, not playing regularly, like getting to play, the once or twice a week that we do as, dads and people who have jobs and like careers and lives. We don't often get to play as much as we'd like to, but I could still keep to, anywhere from like a scratch to a 5 handicap, like sort of fluctuated in that range. And yeah, just lots of people would hit me up all the time, like, how do you hit it so far? How do you play consistent? What should I do exercise-wise here or there, or blah, blah, blah. And I swore I'd always keep them separate, but then obviously the universe has just brought them together, and like it's literally all I do now is talk golf and golf fitness. So that's the long story really short, like, 20 years of my life condensed into like a couple minutes, but that's where we are now. And I work with clients remotely all over the world, like, Australia, South Africa, all through Europe, Austria, Italy, and then mainly the US. Like the northeast of the US is a very big community of golfers who are very seasonal and avid in, smashing it during the off season, getting their bodies in a good position, and then obviously, playing some good golf in the season. So that's where I've been and where I've come from, mate.
That's awesome. And I should say how we met as well, over in the PGA show in Florida.
Yeah,
You were
yeah.
giving some feedback to a client on deadlifting, I think, and I just sort of perched
Yeah.
up with, oh, reminds me of the biomechanics days. So yeah, it's really cool to have that chat there. Great to be on your podcast last week, and then it's awesome to have you back on. So I think a really good place to start is we all know distance is important, but what are the bigger benefits? You've been doing this, as you say, for 20 years. What are the bigger benefits for golf conditioning in terms of golf performance?
Yeah, so talking conditioning as in like fitness and cardiovascular health, or are we talking just conditioning in general, like being
In
fit and
general,
strong and capable?
strength,
Yeah,
flexibility, cardiovascular.
I really feel that the stone that is often left unturned with almost every single golfer that you see on the course is their bodies. Their bodies just aren't in a position, whether it's flexibility, mobility, speed, stamina, endurance, power output, whatever it might be, they're leaving that stone, like that portion of their game, unturned. They'll go and buy all the equipment, they'll go and do lessons, they'll go and do all these things, but the vehicle which swings the golf club, that is the most important thing in the whole equation, is often left to just like a couple of stretches here, or treating it like I like to say if we had a Formula One car, we wouldn't go away and do the things that we do, put all the fuels that we put into our bodies, like beer and like all the like crap, essentially. We wouldn't be putting that into a race car. So we're doing all this stuff outside of the game, not training, and expecting our bodies to perform really well on the course. That's like the overarching part of it, why it's really important. The next thing is, like, sure, we want to be playing to our potential and playing the best golf we can, but we also want to be able to play the volume of golf that we want to in our lives. We don't want to be limited to like not being able to play because we're not fit or strong enough or whatever it might be when we're invited on these, boys or ladies golf trips, and not being able to play 1, 2, 3, 4 days in a row or 36 holes on a day because our bodies are the limiter. The reason I train and a lot of my clients train is because they want to have the choice as to whether to play all those rounds of golf or not, and not have their bodies telling them whether they can or not because it can't handle the volume. So if we train our bodies, build our bodies up to be stronger than the demands of golf, the demands of golf become easier, but also like we can play to a much higher standard when we're actually out there playing. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight as to the importance of, training and just keeping our bodies in the best shape that we can.
Yeah, I love that. And we could be on this question for a long time. I think another one, just to add this on, is actually the ability to practice or swing a golf club for over an hour and actually maintain good form and have the strength or the endurance to be able to do that. So yeah, there's so many benefits, wide reaching across all of that. So I think that really feeds into the next point, which is we've teed it up. We know it's important. We haven't even touched on distance, which we don't even need to really introduce these days. But where does a golfer who's thinking, great, okay, that makes sense to me, but I've done nothing, where do they start?
Yeah, that's a really good question and something I have really strong opinions on. And so there's two different avenues that people can start, essentially. One is to follow a cookie cutter or general type program, and then the other way would be to go and get some expert advice and find out the exact exercises that they can be doing based on their limitations to get the best result in the least amount of time, essentially. So I like to talk about it as either paying with green or red. We have lots of time, we have lots of blood, sweat and tears that we can be putting into things, and we can put time and dedication into trial and error. People can pay with red, and that's blood, sweat and tears, essentially. The other way is to pay with green, and that's money, green paperback. So essentially, we're paying somebody for their knowledge and their education and the 20 years that they've spent to learn the skill in order to give us a program that we know will get us to the result. So that's the two different routes people can go down. I'm not against either, because when people are younger, they've got more time and effort to put into it, and they can try and be the guinea pigs on themselves, and that's perfectly fine. But they will come to a point over time where the things that they're doing, they might just repeat the same circuits or do the same things over and over, and they're going to get diminishing returns over the course of doing that. So it's going to need to become highly specific in terms of what they do in order to keep them driving forwards. The older guys that I work with, and I don't say older because I'm, getting close to 40 myself, but people in the 35 to 55-year-old bracket, which is myself included, and probably yourself, Will.
Yep, nicely in there as well.
Yeah, so with us, like, we've built up a little bit of equity and like we're a bit more financially secure. So we know that our mortality has become more apparent to us in that, we've just gone through 40 years. We probably only have another 40 good years of golf left. So we're like, how do we just get the result much faster and just like learn this really quickly so that then we can continue on doing that thing into the future? And that's where guys will come to me and be like, cool, like, let's just work through a mobility screening, work through a movement assessment, and just figure out exactly what's going on with my body. Build me a program that's going to have me spending the least amount of time in the gym to get the best results on the golf course and to keep me playing pain-free for as long as possible. So they're the two different ways in which people would get started with golf fitness. Yeah, in from what I've seen online and talking to, hundreds or thousands of golfers at this point in time.
Nice. So you kind of touched on that there. So there's sort of screenings that you do up front. It's quite interesting because years ago when TPI came around, I think there was one peer-reviewed piece of research which was kind of looking at limitations in movement and how that may affect the golf swings, and it was very ropey. It's grown a lot since then. So I suppose what are your favorite tests to look at with golfers that tend to just go, there we go, there's an issue?
Yeah. So there's a few. In the TPI screening, we've got 16 tests that we run through. With all my clients, I also run through a whole bunch of things that they would do in the gym. So we look at like single leg strength, like just squatting mechanics, deadlifting mechanics, and also pressing, like push-ups. It's really important to work on external rotation when we're doing pressing movements. So the shoulder's getting strengthened through external range of motion, so we can obviously complete a full swing, holding the top of a backswing with our trail arm. So that's what I conduct. The more important ones that I see in the TPI screening, there'd be three, and that's literally to test the hips, the thoracic, and the shoulders. So if you can boil it down to those three key areas, once hips are rotating internally, externally 60 degrees, then it means they've got sufficient rotation there, which means they can complete a swing. If we've got 45 degrees of rotation in the thoracic spine, so someone can sit there, isolate the thoracic and turn it to 45 degrees each direction, it means they've got sufficient rotation there. And then if we look at the shoulders and our trail arm, people probably can't see this, but if we can rotate our trail arm to 90 degrees or greater, when we're standing in a golf posture, so hunched over towards a 5-6 iron posture, then we're going to have sufficient external rotation in the shoulders to reach a full backswing. So if we've got all those three things, then generally people's swing faults or characteristics are not too bad, that they're making decent contact with the ball, and then they can start working on actual performance on the course, as opposed to getting their body in a position where they're not having to rely on compensations during the swing, like coming out of posture in order to get a full swing, or flattening their shoulder plane, or doing these other things which people often hear of, and it's because their bodies literally just can't move into that position. So yeah, they'd be the three key ones.
I love that, and I think most golfers will be aware of thoracic spine in terms of rotation, but they really neglect how important the hips are, and shoulders is another one, which is nice to hear from your experience. So no, that's amazing.
One last little piece to that is they all need to work together as well. If we're thinking about a swing and we think about piece by piece, brick by brick, if we can rotate our hips, but then our thoracic doesn't rotate and it's blocked, then it means that our hips and our shoulders need to rotate more to make up for the lack of rotation with the thoracic. So this is where people will come to me with back pain and they're like, yeah, my back's sore, I need to do back strengthening exercises. And it's like, well, no, hips don't rotate, your thoracic doesn't rotate, but your shoulders are fine. So the thing between your hips and your between your thoracic and your hip rotation is your lower back. It's being asked to rotate to compensate for these other two things not working. And that is why it is sore, because these two things are not functioning. So if we actually don't do any strengthening of the lower back and we just focus on hip and shoulder or hip and thoracic mobility, wow, poof, away goes the back pain. And it's shit, you rotate further, you make better contact, you've got all these better positions in your swing, everything just feels better. So that's, just one last little bit I wanted to add to that. It's not, the site of the pain is not always a problem when it comes to when we do screenings.
That's great to hear, and it's really cool to hear your experience with that. So again, building on from that, then we've touched on, I suppose, mobility, flexibility. The common thing we'd hear from strength and conditioning is then on top of that you then have building strength, building power, and then building speed. Is that the way you go? Have you adapted that in any way?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I work with guys, we take more of a longer term, more sustainable approach to their training, because when people come to me, they're either in pain, they want to build speed or power, or they've tried speed stick training and they haven't seen results with it, or they've become injured from doing that. And the common theme to it all is that their body just can't handle the demands and the volume in which they're trying to put into it. With a lot of my clients, I take them through and we build out what I've coined as their bomber's blueprint, essentially. So we build an individualized program for them.
Shaun.
Yeah, it is. It's a marketing thing. But so we build out the bomber's blueprint, and that really begins with, it's got three sort of macro cycles or big parts to it. So the macro cycles are foundations, strength, and speed, power, performance. So foundations is where we build unilateral strength and muscle. So we're trying to build each side to even out sides of the body. Side dominant can make a lot of imbalances across the body. So we build strength and muscle in that component. We also work each side, and then we're also working on mobility. So we're trying to mobilize areas which are the red flags or the low-hanging fruit. So get those hips moving better, get the thoracic moving better, so the back pain goes away. So that's the foundations. I use a lot of hypertrophy-based training in that with functional movements. So we're trying to build muscle and we're trying to move through large ranges of motion, because a golf swing is a large range of motion and it requires strength through that range of motion. Otherwise we get injured. So we work on that for a period of time. Once we've then built a little bit of muscle and strength and mobility, we move into strength training. So people have had lots of time to practice those movements, get better with those movement patterns. They're comfortable lifting lighter weights, because we use lighter weights for the hypertrophy-based stuff than we would for strength work. I then give them strength work, which is similar to that, but it's using both sides of the body. So we go to bilateral training. We can move heavier loads. We're more confident with the movements. and we start to use the extra muscle to build more strength. Because if we're more muscular, we're stronger. We should be stronger. It's why they have different weight classes in sports. It's why Manny Pacquiao doesn't fight Mike Tyson, because they're two different power levels, right? And strength levels. One would kill the other one if you punched him. I think you can guess which one would kill the other and might bite his ear off as well. But that aside, eat him for breakfast. But with the strength work, yeah, we're trying to build that out. So just building on top of that foundation that we've laid. Once we've built the strength in somebody, then we can move to the speed, power, performance. That's where we layer on contrast training, we layer on overspeed and overload training. So that's where we're really trying to ramp up their performance, even plyometric stuff too. So we're trying to use that extra muscle and strength to produce more force or power. So we're just inherently able to have a much, much higher increase of power potential when we actually go through that cycle or that flow of training program. What people actually see, because they haven't done that hypertrophy-based stuff for a while, if you just think back to physics, basic physics, speed equals distance over time. So if we want to increase our speed, we increase the distance of our swing, so we increase our mobility a tiny bit, and we keep the same amount of time to get to the ball. It means that we've gotten more speed in the club, so people start hitting it further without doing any speed training. Then we get to the strength work, and obviously, being stronger, being able to apply more force, they can swing it faster again. And then speed and power, like specifically working on it, like it even goes up again. So it's not uncommon for clients to make, small gains all the way throughout that Bomber's blueprint as we go through it. But yeah,
That's
sorry if
nice.
that was a bit long-winded.
No, it was always good to hear. I wanted to touch on one thing with that as well, with your expertise, which you answered actually. So do you see the biggest gain in speed in certain areas? The reason I asked this is when I was head of golf at Exeter University, we'd benchmark all of the high performance players when they came in September. They didn't do the foundations, as you say, a lot of hypertrophy, getting used to the movements for about 8 to 10 weeks. Then we'd start to get into strength training. Then we'd be at the Christmas period, and everyone was a heck of a lot stronger, had a lot more muscle mass on them. When we remeasured them, they got slower. And it wasn't it was partly because they hadn't had a specific stimulus of speed training for them. As soon as we put that in, it was a huge jump up. But I think also, as we went into winter, a lot of them were spending less time hitting golf balls. They had more clothes on, they had more layers, they weren't used to hitting it hard. So what do you see from your experience? Because you've got a lot more data on that than me.
Yeah, well, it varies on hemispheres. Like, because in Australia, the guys are playing year round. In South Africa, like a lot of these people are playing year round, so they don't really have like dips and ebbs and flows in their in the amount of balls that they can hit and the amount of times that they play during a year. Whereas like the Northern Hemisphere guys, if they don't have access to simulators and they're not actually swinging the club during that strength type training, some people can see a bit of a drop off. But I mean, I just had a client who he lives in Manhattan, and he's literally just gone through another hypertrophy block, like the second lot of hypertrophy block that we've gone through. And he just was sick for like 2 to 3 weeks. He's gone and done a club fitting, like just unfortunately had it timed just now to do the club fitting. And he's still swinging at 115 club head speed and 170 ball speed, despite having just had 3 weeks off, which was his, like, just above his ceiling before we started. And it's his ceiling now. But as soon as we get back into the strength work and a bit of the speed work layered in, that will ramp back up to 118-ish, 118 to 120 when he really tries to have a go at it. So like, I know that's not like a specific answer to the question, because it varies a lot with individuals. One of the key things, and you'll appreciate this, like this way of thinking, but if somebody, so we're all predisposed genetically to be better with either slower twitch or faster twitch. The only way to truly know like what to give each person, aside from, asking them a whole bunch of questions about their training history, what they've done, injuries, all that sort of stuff, would be literally to do a muscle biopsy and just test their muscle, which we can't do.
No one
Andy
wants that
Galpin
done really either.
Yeah, like a pen, like an Apple Pencil sized needle, like going straight into your muscle and pulling out a big strand. Like, that's the only way we're really going to know for somebody, like, what exactly to give them. But through questionnaires and finding out what training they've done before and things they've done in the past. And it's why I love working individually with people, because you can really get to that and ask those questions and then give them stuff which is different to what they've done before. Some guys will come in and they're like, yeah, I've done like 8 to 10 reps like my whole life in training, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, cool. Well, actually, hypertrophy works even up to like the 20 to 30 rep range. So we're going to do like some of those weights up to 20 to 30 reps for you. And we're going to do it for 5 to 6 sets per muscle group, each day for, 4 times a week. So you do like 20 to 24 sets a week, because that's just what your body needs as opposed to others. So yeah, that's like it's a bit of a roundabout way to say like each person is very different essentially when it comes to that. I'm not surprised that some people respond that way, especially if they're pro athletes, because they will need a higher stimulus than a lot of other people, like a higher amount of balls hit, higher amount of training, all that type of stuff.
True, true. So I'm looking forward to the next section, but before we get there, I think wrapping up, I suppose, the gym side, what are some of the best exercises that you recommend for golfers? And maybe we start with like, what's a great sort of place for beginners to start? And then when they can do that, what's a little bit more of an advanced exercise?
Yeah. So when it comes to, we'll just talk like really quickly on mobility. If like anytime someone asks me like, what's the best mobility exercises for a golfer to do? And I'm like, I talked about them earlier, your hips, your thoracic and your shoulders. If you do hips, thoracic, shoulders in a warm up, then you're going to be in a far better position. If you do it dynamically, you do it in a warm up just before you go and play, the body's going to be in a far better position than you just rocking up on the first tee and just trying to hit your first drive. Going and just trying to do, like 20 swings in the net and then going to play. Like I would actually advise like do the hips, thoracic and shoulder mobility before you play as opposed to hitting 20 balls. You'll probably get more from it. So that's that. We can do a 90-90 hip switch. We can do internal, external rotations, kneeling, windscreen wipers, like standing box hip circles. There's so many different hip exercises. If you want ideas, just look at my YouTube. There's like hundreds of videos on there that you can see. The next for the thoracic, my favorite one of all, and for people watching this, if this is going on YouTube, it's literally, my wife always gives me a bit of crap for it when I'm explaining it to people because I say it in a bit of a funny way. But, sitting there, golf club on your back, you're going to rotate into your backswing as far as you can. Once you're there, think of water pouring out of a teapot down the side. Yeah, and you're side bending. So we're contracting one side, opening up the other. Yeah, coming back to center, trying to rotate further and doing the same thing. It's called a thoracic rotation with side bends, doing, 5 reps of that each side. We're using, you'll appreciate this, agonist and antagonist muscles. So essentially contracting one side opens up the other, just like a bicep flexing, the tricep will relax. So we're doing that, but with rotation. So it opens up the thoracic really well. And then for the shoulders, just really simple one, like stick a golf club down the back of your arm and just pull your arm further that way. Just externally rotating the shoulders. Or if you do really close grip push-ups, turn the fingers out and do, 5 to 10 reps on your toes or your knees, taking the shoulders through external rotation and also loading them through it. So it's getting a lot of blood flow through there. So that'll help with that. So that's like 3 really easy like mobility things that you can just hit straight away in the locker room on the first tee. If you want to be that guy doing push-ups on the first tee, I don't really care these days if people see me do that stuff. When they see me hit it 300 yards and I fly over their ball, it's like, you should have done some push-ups, mate, at the start.
They're joining you the next week. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're like, oh, so what is it exactly that you do? Like they start asking questions about. Okay, now you want to know. But then as for like gym exercises, so if we think back to what I was saying before, we want to add muscle mass, we want to have mobility and flexibility, and we want to move through large ranges of motion. So if you've got that filtering system for selecting movements in the gym, that's going to serve you really well. Some movements that are great at that: squatting, lunging, deadlift. So that'll be squatting and hinging movements or squatting, deadlifting movements. Great for taking the hips through large ranges of motion, building strength through the glutes, quads, hamstrings. Really good power source for stability and also, or really good power source, and really good for stability, different lies in the sand, uphill, downhill, all that type of stuff we have to deal with, and also standing over a driver to hit it as hard as we can. As for thoracic or rotational stuff, pull-off presses are great. So that's obviously like with a band or with a cable machine. So doing some rotational stuff there, even basic stuff like a Russian twist. If you want to jazz it up a bit, lift your heels off the floor, make sure you touch as wide as you can, like as far away as you can with straight arms rather than just tapping side to side. Create as much width as you can. And then for your shoulders, as much as it might be controversial, but bench press is a great one. I'd suggest with dumbbells because then you're getting even amounts of work on each side of the body. And we're also going through as large a range of motion as we can with the chest because we know that pressing or building strength in the chest helps with shoulder adduction. So our ability to contract the chest muscles is helping with shoulder adduction, which helps with obviously creating, if we've got width in the swing, to shallow it and create speed through the ball. So there's a few different things that people can think about with exercise selection and then like a few specific ones. So hopefully that answers that for you.
I think that's awesome, Shaun. And I think it kind of gets back to something which I suppose used to be a bit of a myth, which is we have this like golf specific fitness. And essentially any sport, we've got 85% of just basic core movements, which apply to all sports. And then we have that 15% on top, which may be differential for each sport. So we've got something I really want to talk about, which is speed training. So one of the things you
Yeah.
suggested here is mistakes to avoid when speed training. So first up, I suppose at the moment I've got a stack system. I brought that for the university. There's many different brands out there. I think the stack system is probably my favorite that I've come across. But what does speed
Yeah.
training look like? When should golfers use it? And then what are some mistakes that golfers make?
Yeah, so I would caution a lot of golfers when they are wanting to start speed training to just pay attention to when they're starting out, like if they start to feel any niggles or pains or anything start to show up, because speed training when you're swinging a speed stick is very different to what you should feel like when you're actually training for technique and positional stuff that you're doing work with a coach. I want to try and get people to separate them as much as possible. So that's the first thing to be cautious of. Some people can dive straight into it because they're playing 3 rounds a week and they hit, heaps of balls and they're already training and doing all this stuff. But speed training is putting a different and higher demand on the body. You don't go out and hit 14 drivers as hard as you can on the golf course. But when you go and like do that, say we played 3 times a week, that's all of your drives, doing it in one session and doing it even faster when you're doing one speed training session. Because I guarantee you'll do more than 45 swings as hard as you can, close to that 45 to 60.
Not split over 4 hours either.
Yeah, it's all in. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And some people do it faster. Some people try and do it in like 6 to 8 minutes because they're rushed with 0 warm up. And it's like from the first swing is as hard as they can. Yeah. So just be really cautious of that and really careful. Because it's when I explain it that way, people are like, oh yeah, no shit. Like that sounds really like simple and like I should have considered that, but because it's a golf swing, they're like, oh, I can swing a golf club, like it's easy, like it shouldn't be any problem at all. But just consider that the first mistake when people just go and try and jump straight into speed training is they don't have that difference in speed training and swing training. So when you're training positions, it's like doing things like, Luke Benoit talks about. He talks about freezes and positional and foam balls and not worrying about where the ball goes and thinking about the club head and positions and that type of thing. And I'm sure you're very similar with a motor learning type background and coaching. We want to think about the positions a lot more and you'll go slower to then go faster over time. With speed training, we're trying to take off the governor and go as hard as we can. So we're literally trying to swing even a little bit longer than normal and way, way harder than we normally would at the ball. So if we can, just as an example from myself and even a client who's in Canada currently, he's swinging around 140 to 145 miles an hour with a light speed stick. So the super speed green sticks for those who use it. My best, I don't know, I can't remember the exact numbers, either 144 or 146 was my fastest with the green stick. So that's lighter than a golf club. Obviously, I don't swing like that on course. That would bring my on-course swing speed to like 120 to 122. So you can see the difference there. Speed training is serving to increase that higher end of how fast we can go so our body knows how to move that quickly. So that then when we go onto the course, we can actually swing at that 120 and it doesn't feel like I'm going to come out of my shoes when I hit it, So really just letting go of it. There's no ball there. You don't care where you're swinging. You don't care if you lose your balance a little bit. Like it's everything that you have in all the attempts that you're doing, and it shouldn't be holding anything back. The higher output we have for each swing, the more we're gaining from the training. As soon as we get down below like a 90% intent for a swing, you should just call the session there because you're starting to get too tired, or have longer rest breaks so that you can have a higher output. So that's the first mistake. So hopefully you're nodding away there. Hopefully that made sense and you agree with that.
Yeah, most certainly. The rest is the one that I used to bang on to the university players. Is like, if you don't have enough rest in between each swing, you're just not going to have the maximal output. So yeah, no, great stuff.
Yeah.
If you got some more, you carry on, Shaun. You just keep delivering the value.
Yeah. Okay. No worries. So the second mistake I would say is once you reach a bit of a ceiling, is thinking that doing more volume with it is going to get you through that ceiling. So what I mean by that is if you start getting to a point where all you're doing is swing speed training and playing golf and you've sort of topped out at, 100 or 110 miles, whatever that number is for you, you think more volume of the speed training is going to get you through it. I would actually argue, and I've got many, many clients who can prove this and myself, if we go back to the foundations and build a little bit more muscle, so more mobility, more muscle and strength comes up, you should have a higher output for power. However, that takes time. It's not an immediate thing that people get. It's not an immediate response. So people are very hesitant to take one step back to then go 2 steps forward. So It's take a bit of time, build some mobility, build some muscle, build some strength, and then go back to your speed training, and you should start to notice your thresholds start to go up again. So that'll be the second mistake there. You're nodding like you agree with that one as well?
Yeah, no, it's good to hear. It's good to hear. I'm wondering what number 3 is, and if not, I've got a little bit of a question at the end.
Yeah, well, throw me a question. Throw me a question first, and then I'll talk about number 3. I might change number 3 depending on what you say.
Yes, I think one of the things is when people are doing this, you talked about the speed with the light stick versus say like heavier than a golf club. What do those numbers mean
Yep.
to you? So say we've got a golfer at say 105 right in the middle, and then their light stick is only 105 as well. What does that tell you about their body and speed training or what they need to do?
Yeah, it's not a very common thing for that to happen. So just to give people an idea, so when we speed train, and I'll use super speed as the example because that's really easy with the 3 sticks, like changing weights and stuff can be very individual for a lot of people with the stack and rip sticks. So with the super speed sticks, there's a green, a blue, and a red. With the green, it is 20% less than a golf club, then it goes 10% less than a golf club, and then it's 5% more than a golf club, I believe, is the 3 staggered numbers. Don't quote me on the exact percentages because I think they change them when they put them out, but that's roughly what they are. So there's 2 that are lighter and then 1 that is slightly heavier. With the numbers, I normally look at someone's highest swing speed with the lightest club as like sort of numbers to baseline them on. So that's when I talk about that 144 to 146 that I was swinging at. That's with the lightest club and the lightest thing because we don't have an exact number of the weight for the golf club with the speed sticks. With the stack, you can set it up to that. I think you can, it's 195 grams, isn't it? That the stack's version of a driver. I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
That's
I
what
think
they
you can
say
get
is the
that.
equivalent. Yeah, so I just take it off that because if we just choose one variable and we're doing all this training and we see that variable increase or decrease, then we know that there's something changing, right? So that's just the easiest one for me is to go off that. So if someone's the lightest club and they're swinging that as hard as they can, and then their driver speed on course is the same as that, it tells me that their intent in their speed training is not high enough. It tells me that they're not putting in enough effort there and they're thinking about their swing mechanics and all the other things are going through their head too much, because they can reach the same speed there as when they have the master of hitting the ball and caring about where it goes. We need to just not think about what's happening. You need to swing it a little bit longer. You need to swing as hard as you can. And I want to see a few swings. And even when people will be like that or get to that stage, I'll say, I want you to do like 3 swings in a row or 4 or 5 swings in a row. And each one has to be a little bit faster than the next. They all have to flow into the next one. So what that does is that just gets their kinematic sequence flowing a little bit better. So their transfer of power just gets better as they do like 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row. Are you nodding because you've seen this as well?
No, I was interested. I come across it a couple of times with players, where we see that, and I can have some thoughts, but you're the expert here. So no, it was really
Yeah.
interesting to hear your thoughts for that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
it's
thinking as you do that, you tell people to video their speed training so that you can give feedback specifically on that. Because I'm guessing that's one of those where you may
yeah,
have really easy wins in terms of your understanding as a strength and conditioning coach, your understanding of golf mechanics of like,
yeah,
oh, you need
it's
more lateral transfer, or you need to feel, the club traveling further, as you say.
yeah, it's not something I get everyone to do, but if we've reached a bit of a plateau and I'm like I want to actually see what you're doing here, like I want to see why these numbers aren't changing. Because normally 9 times out of 10 people will progress. If they're following the program, I know that the things that I'm giving them are proven because I don't differ from science or what studies have shown. I'm literally just giving them science-backed stuff. So if they're following the program with the right intensity and intent behind it, then they should be progressing up because they haven't done this style of thing before. So if there is some sort of a thing there where they're not seeing progress, it's like, cool, let's look at a video of it. Let's see what's going on. And I actually gave client a feedback a couple of weeks ago about that. I felt a bit bad because I was like, oh, was that, you weren't swinging as hard as you can there, were you? And he's like, actually, that was like, they were my highest swings. I was like, I've seen you swing like that on course. I used to play golf with him in Bermuda. I was like, I've actually seen you swing that fast on course. Like, we need to like really not think or care about it. And I've told him, like, he's doing a couple more weeks with the system that he's on, and then I'm going to get him to change swing speed protocol to a different one that's going to involve some step changes and things like this, because I feel that's going to help him a bit more rather than just being static and trying those faster swings. So get the step changes in there, the other side and that sort of things.
Nice. It's nice to hear someone talk about speed training because think it's a really useful tool once you have those fundamentals. And as you say, once you progress up to it, that's a huge thing in terms of injuries, just going from 0 to 100. And we covered that really well. Is there anything else you want to cover about speed training before we get into our last little bit? I'd love to ask you around structuring golf fitness programs.
Yeah, so the third mistake that people make is it's the intensity of the sessions that they put together. So I sort of touched on it earlier with one of the other points, but the way that I'll describe it here is if we're going to do speed training, we need to do it on days that we're not playing golf or not training, or if we are doing it on the same days that we're training or playing golf, we need to do it as the first session of the day. So if clients ever ask me, I've got today's session to do, I'm also trying to do the speed training session because life isn't perfect. I've got work, travel, and family and all this sort of stuff. My advice to them is, cool, let's do your dynamic warm-up and mobility session to get the body moving, then go into your speed training, do that first, and then go through your session and do your hypertrophy and your strength and et cetera work afterwards, because we need that speed work to be done at as high intensity as possible or effort output as possible so that we get the most from it. We don't want to be doing it when we're fatigued at the end of a session, because you're going to feel like you're moving as fast as you can. But after you've done, 3-4 sets of squats and your legs are a bit jelly, you're definitely not going to be putting out as high a swing speed as you possibly could. So that would be the third mistake, is the way in which people, that's just one little example, but the way that they structure it into their overall training sessions a week. And a lot of people also, they think they need to do it like 4 or 5 times a week, this speed training, but that's just too much. You only need to do 2, maybe 3 sessions a week. If you're playing golf and if you're training, that's all the stimulus we need in order to improve. We don't need more than that. Pretty sure you agree with that. Like, we don't need any more stimulus than that.
No. Here, particularly when we're thinking about normally the population that we are with golfers, 2-3 gym sessions as a basis, 1 round of golf, 2 rounds of golf, bit of practice. If you're doing well to fit in speed training. So golfers are fine to do speed training after, say, 40 golf balls, if they're doing a little bit of a technique session and do that, but make sure they don't do it when they're fatigued after, say, a gym session. Is that the advice?
Yeah. Yeah,
or would you even say do it in front of the 40 golf balls that they're going to do on technique?
Yeah, it depends what they're doing. Like if they're going in and they're hitting like some 9-irons and wedges and things like that, like sure, like it's probably okay. That's probably a decent warm up, because 9-irons and wedges aren't full speed. If they're going and hitting like 20 drivers and then 20 long irons, I'd definitely do the speed work first. You'll just feel so much better when you're swinging the long irons and driver afterwards anyway.
Nice. I wanted to ask because I just thought there'd be someone listening who wants to ask that question, so I've got to get it in there.
Yeah, 100%.
So I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got another call off this. It's been awesome. We've covered a lot, but just to finish up with, I suppose we touched on it there, but structuring a golf fitness program, what does that look like? Maybe at a week level, and then maybe over the course of a season.
Yeah. So I gave the season example. So with the 3 macro cycles of the hypertrophy foundations type stuff, the strength, and then the speed and power. So we'd do that in 3-month blocks or 4-month blocks of those things. As we go down to cycles, like little mini cycles within that, or micro cycles, whatever you're calling them these days, we will have different focuses through that, or we'll have different movements in it. So if we're, say, talking about the foundations, philosophy there, hypertrophy, unilateral work, and large range of motion to build mobility and strength through the large range of motion. So lunges, like any lunging variation. So we've got like alpine squats, we've got rear foot elevated split squats, we've got walking lunges, we've got rearward stepping lunges, single leg presses on a leg press machine. Like there's so many different variants that we can put into there. So we'll do one for a period of time, for pressing off a leg pressing strength or squatting strength, whatever you want to call it. We'll do that for 6 weeks or 4 to 6 weeks and progressively get harder and harder, and then a deload week. Yeah, and then we'll go to a different exercise. So we'll go from the lunges to a single leg press, and then we'll do that for 6 weeks. And then we'll go to a different type of lunge, for example. So that'll be like 3 different cycles with 3 different squatting exercises in that. Then if we're thinking about pressing, the first phase might be dumbbell bench press for chest strength. After 6 weeks, we've exhausted or we've progressed a little bit in that, gotten stronger, gotten more mobile, etc. To add variance to the program, we'll then go to alternating bench press. So someone will hold one up and then they'll press one and then they'll press the other one. So we're changing the stimulus. It'll be a different weight they can use. They're holding more time under tension. There's a different stress on the body or stimulus on the body to create a slightly different adaptation. So people, like in this respect, people often change exercises too often when they're doing programs, they don't stick to a linear progression or progressive overload for long enough to see actual progress. One of the ways in which I use this with lots of clients when they start, like the majority of them, because it's just easier with less weights or less access to equipment or to get their intensity a bit higher, is to start with a weight in week 1 and choose a certain amount of reps with it and tell them to go to within 2 to 3 reps short of failure for that weight and that movement. And then the next week they'll add a rep, and then the next week they'll add a rep, and the next week they'll add a rep, and the next week they'll add a rep. And we do that for 4 or 5 weeks in a row. And then we do one where we just increase the repetitions by sort of 5 or so, but we decrease the weight to 50% of what they were using, and we use it as a deload week. So they're still doing the same thing, but it's taking a lot of the load off the body, and they're just moving through it just to keep the body moving for that deload week, to keep the gains there. And then we move to the next phase. So that's, does that give you an idea of like, we choose an exercise, we progressively overload with it, then we move to the next one. Yeah. And the key like principles there, essentially we want variance in the program. We want progressive overload in the program. We want a time at attention, like I mentioned there, but we don't want to change all those things too much. Like we need to do it for a period of time. What I say is we need to milk all of the gains we can from that before we move to the next thing. If you just keep chopping and changing all the time, like putting money into the stock market and pulling it out when it makes 2% gain, and then putting it into the next thing and then pulling it out when it makes 2% gain, we're not going to see the longer term effects of it. Like, inflation goes at 3-4% every year. If we keep it in there for like a 10-year cycle, we can almost like 1.5x our money. The same thing with strength. Like if we stick to things for periods of time, we can gain a lot more strength and muscle, as opposed to just changing it for the next sexy thing that's online. And I find a lot of people who come to me who've done stuff before, they've either just done the same thing for too long and had diminishing returns of it, the old man, same routine type style, or the sort of a little bit younger guys, they've chopped and changed programs too much and not really milked all the progress they can because they've seen the next thing on Instagram or downloaded the next free ebook from the other person. So having me as their coach to be like, look, this is what you're going to do for 6 weeks. Don't ask any questions. Just do this thing. Sure, ask questions about how to do the exercise and things like that, but this is what you're doing. Yeah, let's just stick to this thing and let's just see what happens at the end of the 6 weeks. They send videos and it's like, cool, go heavier, go lighter, do this, do that. Like I just tell them what's going on, and just having that feedback, they're just like, cool, like, yes, sir, like go for it.
That's it. And I think this is one of the best things, as you said, wrapping around to the start with hiring someone, is you get to take all of that worry of, are you doing the right thing? And you can just follow a plan. And that's so important if you want to get better. I've got one question as you're saying all of that. And again, I was thinking of someone listening to this saying, I want this information from Shaun. So when you look at a week and splitting those up, is there any difference between how you would sort of fit those programs together, like a push-pull, an upper body, lower body, whole body? Or is it genuinely just down to what you think suits that individual?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it is a very individualized thing, but like for the majority of people, I like to program a full body split for golfers because it spreads the soreness across a week. So one of the other things we need to consider when we're building these programs is how much volume we're going to give to people across a week. And we know how much volume we need to give to people to see gains in certain areas if they're hitting it at the right intensity. So for someone just starting out with hypertrophy training, they can do 10, 12 sets of exercises across a week. So do 10 or 12 sets of a squatting movement. So they might do 4 on Monday, 4 on Wednesday, 4 on Friday, or 3 on Monday, 3 on Wednesday, 3 on Friday. So, anywhere in that sort of realm. And they're going to see progress in, their quads and their squatting strength and that sort of thing. So they'll progress in that respect. Someone who's intermediate needs to be up to around 15 sets, advanced 20 sets. If you're taking performance enhancing supplements, 25 sets plus, like the bodybuilders, they can handle all that volume because they've got the assistance of something else to recover.
Okay.
So that's a consideration that we would put across the week. What I find if guys are doing like traditional like bro splits, like the back and bis, chest and tries, that type of thing. While if someone's been doing it for years and playing golf, and they want to keep doing that, sure, I'll program that for them. But in general, it's keep it a full body split. So do squatting, hinging, pushing, pulling all on one day with some mobility to start and a core and rotational piece at the end. And then that's how I make up the workouts for the majority of my clients. And then they can spread the volume across the week. They're a little bit sore every single day, as opposed to being really sore in the legs for after Monday's session on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then on Wednesday's session, they're really sore on Thursday and Friday in their chest and upper body. And then Saturday, Sunday, they're really sore from Friday's session where they did, shoulders and hamstrings or whatever the thing is. So if we just split that soreness across the week, it keeps people in a better position to play golf, because that's a common gripe that golfers have. It's like, oh, I'll lose my feel, or I won't be able to play as well, and blah, blah, blah. So yeah, definitely a consideration that we would make.
I love that, Shaun, and that's so useful to hear. It really is. Thanks so much. Look, Shaun, thanks so much for coming on, sharing all of this wisdom. I really hope people got a lot from this, and I've made some notes as well as I try and, similar as you said, aging, trying to keep fit, trying to get the golf ball out there still. So it's really useful. If people want to find you and get in touch, where's the best place for them to do so?
Yeah, so I mean, if people are old school and they like to email, then you can just email me, Shaun@fairwayperformance.com. I reply to everyone who writes to me there. Otherwise, all my content is on Instagram, which is just my name, Shaun _Dyakoff, which I'm sure you'll have in the show notes. And I actually brought up YouTube. So if you just search for my name on YouTube, then you'll see all that content come up there. So there's, our podcast is housed on there, and all the other stuff that I do is housed on there. The movement demonstrations and videos, and talking about, how to get over dissociation issues and pelvic rotation and tilting and blah, blah, blah. So it's all that stuff. Longer form content is on YouTube if people want to check that out too.
It's awesome. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Shaun.
Awesome, mate. Thank you.